Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a hotter sex life, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, solid friendships, a powerful legacy. Find out how good you can have it on this episode of Man Alive. Head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power that accelerates your career and solidifies your confidence with women.
Welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am here with Marcia Baczynski. Welcome, Marcia.
Hi.
I am really glad that we're having this conversation we're having today. We're going to talk about asking for what you want. And this is a really important topic because a lot of men I work with, when we look at why they're not having what they want in their lives, it comes back to whether or not they've actually asked for it, right? And a lot of men and women both come to me and say, this isn't working, or, I'm not having the sex I want. I didn't get the promotion I wanted. And when we go back and look like, okay, well, what have you said and what conversations and what communication have you had? It's often missing that one main point. Oh, I didn't ask. Yeah. So it's funny on the one hand, and it's also really, this can go really deep. So thank you for this.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. And for those of you who have not met Marcia, I want to read a little bit of a bio so you can know who she is, and then we're going to dive right in. So Marcia Baczynski is a relationship coach and sex communication expert who works to provide people with practical tools to create extraordinary relationships. And I would say, actually, one of the things I love about you, Marcia, is your practical tools that I've used myself and that I've, had many of my clients use and our friends and colleagues. There's something about your practical tools that I've never experienced this with anyone else, that they are so clear and go so deep that I don't even know how to say this. I don't think I've ever tried to put this into words, but it's like somehow you capture the essence of what people struggle with in such a practical way that it makes a huge difference for people. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can do this, or, oh, this part works now.
Oh, thanks.
That's one of the things I love about you. Marcia's primary mission is to help people overcome shame and get in touch with what they truly want romantically, sexually, and relationally, even if it's off the beaten path. And she's the co-founder of Cuddle Party and the weekend intensive Make Hot Play Happen. She's appeared in hundreds of publications, and you can find her online at www.askingforwhatyouwant.com.
Hi. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So where do we want to dive into this topic? I mean, you are an expert in this and communication and sex. And I just want to reiterate the part about off the beaten path and, that you've worked with all genders, all relationship types, everything, like everything goes for you. That's another one of the things I love about you is just, it's all good. It's all right. As long as people are using consent and respecting each other. You roll with all of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I love this topic of asking for what you want because, like you said, it's really common that we don't ask for what we want. And there's a lot of very good reasons why we don't ask. Sometimes it didn't occur to us.
Right.
That it was even a thing you could ask for. Sometimes we don't have the words for it. Sometimes there's shame or guilt or I don't want to be too much, or I'll scare them away if I really say what I want. So fear of rejection. A lot of it boils down to shame and fear of rejection, but there's a million variations of that.
Right. We all have our own unique way of shame and fear of rejection showing up.
Like the stories we tell ourselves about, oh, if I was a real man, I wouldn't want that, or, I should already know how to do this, or, any of those kinds of things. There's so many different variations on that theme. And so I'm really interested in working with people, and I really enjoy working with people to find out what it is. But in order for that to be a thing we can discover together, you really have to be okay with whatever comes out of people's mouths.
Right.
So being trained as a sex educator, I got a lot of training on, wow, there's an infinite world of interests out there. And I just feel very like curious most of the time about what people are into, which helps.
Yeah. And I would think even just knowing that, right, for you listening, that there is an infinite number of desires and fetishes and, everything, right,
Mm-hmm.
that exists. And one of the things I love to say to the men I work with is, no matter how pure or kind of innocent or how wild and kinky and whatever your desire is, right, it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many messages we get growing up that, like you said, if you were a real man, you wouldn't have this kind of desire. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you were strong, you'd want to be dominant, or
Mm-hmm.
all of that crap, I'll just
Mm-hmm.
say,
yeah.
that keeps people from actually thinking, oh, well, like you said, this desire would even occur to me sometimes. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the desire doesn't even occur because it's so out of the spectrum of what has seemed okay or
Mm-hmm.
good or right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I guess one question would be, before you even ask for what you want, you have to know what it is. And how do you guide people to know what they want?
Well, I think there's a big thing that is hard around this, which is that there's a misconception that our sexuality belongs to the relationship that we're in.
Mm.
And I think this is true for men and for women. Like, I've seen so many people, they've only had one or two partners in their life, or they've been with a partner for a really long time, and they forget that they had a sexuality before they were ever in a relationship. The children have sexualities. People who are celibate have sexualities.
Yeah.
Old people have sexualities. Everyone has a sexuality, even if their sexuality is asexual.
Right.
But we all have a relationship to sex in our body that is independent of the relationships that we're in.
Yeah.
And many kinds of sex are things that we do with other people. So partner sex. So we have our masturbation habits, or we have our sort of curiosities and porn that we watch, or erotica that we read, or whatever it is. That's our sexuality. And then it meets another person. And then there's this sort of dance of, how do we fit together? What does this match? Can we click together? But then sex is also this thing, because it's a social activity, it's also this thing that we're told we're supposed to just know. And it's the only social activity that we treat that way. Like all other things that humans do together, we get to learn by watching other people.
Right. We get to learn by watching other people. We practice and all these things, right? But we're not.
Everything
examples.
from like how to use a fork to how to celebrate a birthday to how to bury our dead, we learn from watching other people. All of these pieces of how to walk, we get to watch other people. How to speak.
Okay, that's profound. I've never thought about it that way before. And
yet we have sex and we're supposed to just know. Like,
right. And then add on top of that porn and other, displays or media or whatever, where it's like, that's not actually the real human range and variety and, the truth of what happens. It's this put on facade. Right?
Yeah. I mean, trying to learn
performance.
And performance is great. I think porn's great for a lot of things, but it's not a very good sex education tool. It's just sort of like learning to drive from watching the Fast and the Furious.
Right, exactly.
Like those are experts with good lighting and a lot of training.
And they're faking a lot of it.
They're faking a lot of it. And even if they're not, it's their sexuality, not yours.
Right.
And they're also doing it in response to a market.
Yes. Like
what do people want to watch and what's trendy this month or this year in porn. So there's a lot of reasons why. There's a lot of things porn is great for, but there's a lot of reasons why that's not really an effective substitute for all the other things we get to watch people do in real life. Like flabby people with bad lighting is how most of us have sex, if we're really honest. But when you're with somebody who's really just you have a connection with, or really that you're just having a fun time with, it's magical. And that internal sensation of having the things that we want be met and seen in another person, you're never going to learn how to do that from watching porn.
Right.
Or from even reading technical manuals about sex.
Yeah. Right. So how do you learn? How do you figure that out?
So there's a few pieces to this. So there's, first you've got to recognize that whatever desires you have are valid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get to want things even if your partner is not into them.
Yes.
You get to want things even if you've never met somebody else who's into that thing. You get to want things that are boring. You get to want things that are wild. You get to want things that are sweet.
Yeah.
You get to want whatever you want.
I love that. One of the things that has been most moving for me also has been working with men who've come out of long-term relationships or marriages where something wasn't, acceptable to their partner, or where they were too scared to even approach it. And then suddenly, right, he comes back to himself and is like, wait a minute, this is actually really important to me. I really want this, or this turns me on. And there's no other reason that I have to, explain that I want this other than it actually turns me on.
Yeah. 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 That's it. That's good enough. That is good enough. And that doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's a separate thing.
Yes.
But wanting, like, you have your desires are legitimate. That's a totally separate conversation from whether your partner's up for it.
Right.
Right. So that's the first thing is what do I want? And then the second is, like, are there words? Do I have words for it? If I'm going to ask for it. And it doesn't have to be literal words, but there has to be a mode of communication. It could be you draw stick figures. It could be that you do interpretive dance. You could leave books, or, send your partner clips or whatever, but having a way to communicate, like, this is the thing. And the mistake a lot of people make is they say, oh, I'm into this thing, but they don't talk about why. Why that does it for them.
Yeah.
So if you tell me you're into sexy nurse, I'm like, oh, okay, sexy nurse. Like, I get to be the sexy nurse and you're the doctor and whatever. But your reasons for wanting me to be the sexy nurse might be that you want me to be, like, patching you up and taking care of you. And, like, sweet and nurturing and kind of with, like, this little medical edge, let's just say. But I might be thinking, like, you want naughty nurse that's like super porny. And so I try to do the super porny thing and it's not nurturing at all. And then all of a sudden, like, we just missed each other. Right. So we're doing naughty, we're doing the sexy nurse, but we're not
meeting that desire, meeting that need.
The thing that's really the turn on around the play. Like,
I love that. I just want to double click on that, right? Like, going deeper into not just what it is, but why, or how you want to feel even, right? Like, oh, I want to feel cared for versus I want to feel, slapped around or whatever it may be. Or like, I just, I want you to, I'm just trying to think of another example, right? Like, right. If we're going with scenes still and there's, professor and student, right? You might want to feel punished or be the punisher. Or you might want to be looked up to, or like there's just such a different energy when you actually go beneath just that initial what.
Yeah. How do you want to feel at the end of it is such an important question. You mentioned in my bio the Make Hot Play Happen intensive, and my co-teacher Midori and I talk about that a lot in that workshop, because it's really hard to figure out what your partner wants if you're not talking about the why or the how you want to feel about it.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a big processy thing. It's really just taking that time with yourself to go, do I have a mode of communicating the thing that really, the nugget of what's really interesting about this to me?
Right. And I'm realizing as we're talking about this, that a lot of the work I do with men is, in a way, unraveling any of the shame that shows up around these desires. Because when the shame is present, to go try to communicate them, it's like, either the words don't come out, or they come out in a way that's not connected, so their partner feels either this kind of disconnection or this fear or this awkwardness, or like, what is going on with you? I can't quite connect to you. And so it's really interesting to see, right, where the work you do and the work I do overlaps. I mean, I think we both do this, right? Working with people with shame. And I think then once there's less shame, we're so much more free to educate whoever we want something from or want something with. And if they don't respond or react in a positive way, it doesn't then mean I'm wrong or I'm bad. It's, oh, that person doesn't want this, or that person doesn't want this right now. Or how could we negotiate such that we could both be closer to getting something we want, or need?
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's a thing, well, going into the negotiation, right? We have these, okay, you figured out your words, how to figure it out now and how to use them.
Yeah.
Another mistake that couples make is that, or people, not even couples, but people who are negotiating sex make is, if I'm bringing something up, it must mean that I want you to do it with me right now and for always. So there's this sense, like when you're bringing a new desire to a partner, or something that maybe you do have some charge around, it's a little bit edgy for you to talk about it. You bring it up, the way they're hearing it might be, I might be saying like, hey, I think I'm interested in this thing. And you're hearing, I want you to do this, and this is going to be our sex life for the rest of your life.
Right.
Like one person's like not even sure if it's the thing that they really want to do, or if they're communicating the thing that really matters. And the other person is laying their own meaning on top of it, and time frame and consistency and all of that. And so one of the things I'm always telling people is like, how long are we talking for?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
And also, is this a negotiation, or are we just sharing interests right now?
Right. That's a huge distinction, right? Because I remember having a partner years ago who was like, sometimes I just need to say these things, or I need to speak this desire that has arisen for me. I don't always know yet if I actually want to do it, or if I want it to remain in the realm of fantasy, right? So having the context of what conversation we're in.
Yeah. So like if you want to tie your partner up or something, let's just say, and you've never done that before, saying, I want to introduce bondage into our sex life might not be the way to go. It might be like, I would like to, so I always tell people we talk about, do you want to do this thing? And that's only one of 4 ways that you can ask. Cause there's 2 things in there. Is it about that you want it, or that you're willing to do it? Right. So like the range of what we want is narrow.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of good stuff in there. The range of what we're willing to do. And when I say willing, I don't mean tolerating, enduring, or going along with, but I mean things that are not necessarily stuff you would come up with on your own, but if your partner suggests it, you're like, that actually sounds fun. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm not in the mood for sushi. I'm willing to go get sushi. Sushi sounds great. Like that wasn't my desire, somebody else's desire, but just because it's somebody else's desire doesn't mean that I'm not into it.
Okay. And then what were the other words you used? Tolerating?
It's not tolerating, enduring, or going along with.
Okay.
Right. So there's want in the narrowest range, things that I want that emerge from me that I'm like, I want to tie you up. Yes. I want sushi. I want to go to Alaska, whatever.
Yes.
The desire is. And then there's the willingness range where your partner's like, I've never been tied up before, but that sounds like an interesting thing to try. I'm willing to do that. Or I've never really put Alaska I just got back from Alaska. So it wasn't in my mind, but I've never been to Alaska before. And this was the case for this trip that I went on. It was somebody that was getting married. I was willing to go to Alaska. It was a thing that I was excited to do. It wasn't it didn't come from me.
Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Like this wholehearted willingness is what I'm talking about. And then outside of that is tolerating, enduring, and going along with. So I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about this other range of stuff. So do you want to do it, or are you willing to do it? And then there's also a distinction between doing and trying.
I like that.
Right? So there's, do you want to do this? Do you want to try this? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to try it? Those are 4 different questions that you can use in the bedroom when you're sort of around something that feels edgy or new, or maybe you don't feel like you have a lot of skill with it yet, or you are not sure where your desire is actually landing, but you keep noticing your desire is circling around a particular topic.
Yeah.
And maybe the 2 of you just don't know enough to know how to meet that desire or scratch that itch or whatever.
Right. And I can just feel like how that starts to get vulnerable in there, both for both sides. For someone who wants something and has never done it and isn't sure how it's going to go, or even if they're going to like it. And then for the other person who's, on the receiving end, or on the willingness end, the one who's receiving the desire.
Right. Receiving the desire.
Right. Not
hearing
just necessarily, hearing the desire. Yeah, right. That this can be this whole new realm of exploration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the number of fights I've seen couples get into about sex and non-sex because one person asked the other, do you want to do this? When what they were actually saying is, I want to do this. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
And then I respond with, you ask me that, and I respond with, no, I don't want that. And then it's like off the table forever. Because
or people take it that way too, right? That's off the table forever instead of, okay, this thing is actually important to me. Let's have a conversation about how we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't want it, do you not want it now? Do you not want it ever? Do you like, how do we get into more of the specifics of that?
Right. Or is it really a thing that you need to want? Are you like enthusiastic? Because it's a different thing to be on the receiving end. Like, I think a lot of men don't really understand what it's like to be a woman and to be sort of on the receiving end of a lot of male sexual attention, and to have to sort of be like, yes, I'm open. And then you're walking down the street and you feel super open and sexy because you had this amazing experience with your lover, and then some other man like sexually harasses you and you shut back down, or just the little comments. And I know it's a very different experience depending on which women you talk to, but these are all things that we're navigating to varying degrees all the time. And so being asked, do you want something by a man? Are you asking me what I want, or are you telling me what you want and offloading the emotional responsibility to me?
Right. And the other thing I can just imagine from my own experience is if a man says to me, you know, do you want to be tied up? Part of my response might be, well, I would want that if, like, if I knew that you were going to pay really close attention to me and be really loving with me while you were doing it, that would be really different from me than if you were going to do it in a way where you were just focused on your own experience and getting your own need met. And we were, you know, not really a team there, or not really, I'm not really being considered. Right. So then I just love how we're getting into all of the underbelly of this.
Right. And maybe that he's wanting, like, the kind of tying up experience he has in mind is maybe something a little rougher, or like sexy and objectifying, and like,
which could be on its own.
Which could be really fun.
Right.
But if you're asking me if I want to get tied up
in a rough way, specifically,
like, and if you're not specifying, I might have one picture in my head of what you're going to do, and then you've got this different picture in your head, and then we do it, and now we're both like, what the hell just happened? This was awful.
Well, I think this might have just solved many, many people. I'm just like looking back in my own past and thinking, wow, right. I think this solves some things wrong years ago.
Whereas if it were like, I'm going to take responsibility and say, hey, I want this. Like, I want to tie you up. Are you interested in that? Or
are you willing to try?
Are you willing to try it? Or are you willing to do it? Or do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things I might want to try, but I'm also like, it's new to me, and I might feel vulnerable, like committing to a full scene or a full encounter or a full week. You know, because I don't necessarily, like, I'm wrestling with my own stuff about being good enough or sexy enough or skilled enough or whatever.
Right. And the good enough, that's the thing that keeps coming back through my mind too, which is a lot of men I've seen, and I think this is true for women too. There's a particular dynamic that I've encountered with men where for a man, if he hasn't known that he's good at something, it was a lot more vulnerable, right? Because then there's this sense of, well, I would do it if I knew I was good at it, or I don't want to let you down.
Right.
And then it's hard to even admit that sometimes with a male ego.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
and I don't want to make this a rope tying thing, but it's a really good example.
It's a good concrete example.
It's a good concrete example, right? So if you're like learning how to tie somebody up, or you've always had these fantasies, but you've never done it.
Yeah.
Expecting that you're going to look like the bondage experts on whatever porn you've looked at might be a little bit of a high standard. Just a little bit.
Just a little.
But so saying, like, asking your partner, do you want to get tied up? Well, she might be like, yeah, I've always fantasized about that. And she's thinking you're going to be good at it because you're asking her if she wants that. Instead, it might be like, I want to learn how to tie someone up. can I use your body? Like, you give me feedback. So it's not a sexy thing, maybe.
Right.
But then it turns into a sexy thing, maybe.
Right. Could. Right. Maybe.
Or it's just like we're having some skills time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that going back to what I was saying at the very beginning about sex as a social thing, like it's a skill. There are skills that we have to learn involved, and creating some space for, can we try this? Are you open to an experiment? Like if we're both bad at this, no harm, no foul. Right.
Again, I'm seeing, all these things in my relationship life, years and decades ago, that where, right, if we'd had the context of, now we're in skills building mode, or now we're in like, we're just going to turn each other on mode, or, all of that, the difference between those two. Or when I have conversations with business partners, it's like, are we in brainstorming mode or are we in action mode?
Right.
But right in the bedroom, are we in skills building or are we in actually just play and fun and enjoying each other? That would make a huge difference.
And I think there's this narrative that it's always supposed to be awesome, where it's always supposed to
satisfy everyone.
Everybody's supposed to be satisfied all the time. There's these really high standards. And again, it's like learning to drive from watching The Fast and the Furious, or learning how to be an expert rope bondage person from watching porn. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening, and I see this in so many people's sex lives, is it just they end up landing on the thing that they know they can do without causing too much upset and without rocking the boat too much.
Right.
And it's a lot of times it's fine, but it's not that hot. And sometimes it's really not even fine. Right.
I was going to say, yeah. Sometimes it's fine, and sometimes it's fine for a little while, and then over the years or the decades, it just becomes like, why are we even bothering with this anymore?
Right.
And what I can see as part of the path out, or part of the path to more hotness and more connection, would be asking for something new, but it's already kind of embroiled in this whole experience of shame. And I tried asking 10 years ago and it didn't work. And so now I'm just, kind of given up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a really good way to sort of open the door for some of these conversations is ask your partner what they like. And that can be really too broad of a question. So putting some parameters on it, like in foreplay, what do you like? Or after we fucked, what do you like? Or if we aren't having intercourse, what do you like? Like giving some limitations on the question gives people some specific context. Because if I ask you, if I just come up to you, I'm like, Shayna, what do you want? You're like, I don't know, a hamburger, a piece? Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
What's the scale? And then the other thing is making it clear that conversation is an exploration, not a negotiation.
Yes.
Right? I'm curious about you. Tell me more about you.
Right. And if you say something, it doesn't mean we ever have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We might figure out a way that we both enjoy doing it and that it would be hot for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Or, we can, I didn't even think necessarily this was all going to be about sex, but, it could just be about taking a trip, or,
totally,
having a different kind of experience in a partnership or a friendship, right? It could be any of those things.
Mm-hmm. There's this great example when I teach one of my Asking for What You Want classes. I give this example of like, two people are talking and they're sort of like, oh, well, they're both basically bringing their willingness to the table, but no one's willing to bring their desire to the table. And so what ends up, that happens all the time. It's like, I want to make you happy. I want to make you happy. Great. Who wants something? And I was talking about this in a workshop, and somebody said, oh, I have a great story about that. I was like, oh yes, tell me what it was. And she said that she and her partner at the time had gone on a vacation that neither of them wanted to go on because one of them brought it up thinking the other one was into it and said, how about we go to Victoria? And the other ones, A said, how about we go to Victoria? And B said, yeah, that's okay. Or like just give some sort of, what do you think of Victoria? Yeah. Oh,
sure.
It's cute.
Okay.
And they've got those little shops, and there's this, and they just started naming attributes that were positive about Victoria without saying, yeah, I want to do that. And so they booked the trip, and they got there, and they're walking down the street, and somebody said, one of them says like, oh, this is fun. I'm so glad you wanted to do this. I wanted to do this. I thought you wanted to do this. So I told that story. They told me that story. And then I taught the workshop again and told that story. And somebody said, oh, I almost bought a house that way. we just started looking at houses. And then before we knew it, we both assumed the other one wanted to move. We were about to sign the paperwork on the house, and one of them just checked in with the other, like, are we sure we want to do this?
Yeah.
I really like our current house. Yeah, me too. Wait, you don't want to? I thought you wanted to move. So then I teach the next workshop and I tell both of those stories. And then the third workshop I teach, somebody said, oh, we almost had a kid that way.
Wow.
Where neither of them wanted kids, but both of them were willing to be parents. And they both thought the other one wanted kids.
Wow.
And so, like, this is not small stake stuff. Like,
no, these are
owning
huge
what you want and saying, I want this, and not just saying, do you want this?
Yeah.
And offloading desire to your partner and hoping that they'll be willing to take responsibility.
Right. Well, and I know we didn't talk yet about your Good Girl Recovery Project because that's for women, but I can relate to that. And I often, not like I say all women are like this, but in some ways I become a spokesperson for certain things that happen for women when I'm working with men. Right. And as you're talking about this, I'm realizing, right, when someone asks me what I want, and then I bring it even into the bedroom where it's more vulnerable, right? It can be scary to say because, well, what if you don't like that? Or what if you think I'm a slut? Or what if you think I'm this? Or what if you think I'm that? And so, right, again, just going back to the shame that comes up with wanting something at all. I mean, and also I realized recently in my family that when I have desires, it just adds a whole nother level of complexity. Like there are other people in my family who are less flexible. And so if they get what they want, there's a more peace that happens in the system. Whereas if I start adding what I want, it adds a lot of anxiety and pressure, and people then, start to feel like, oh, there's more cooks in the kitchen and how do blah, blah, blah. And so I've actually been realizing in my own life that I've kind of taken a back seat in having desires because I grew up feeling like when I have desires, people seem to get flustered and anxious and confused. Mm-hmm. And so we all have these different histories and different patterns around whether knowing what we want is even okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Just the act of wanting something that might be different than what somebody else wants is very, very charged and very charged. Hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because of these family system things. I mean, for a lot of folks, that was their survival mechanism.
Totally.
And for a lot of other folks, it just wasn't, even if there's not that sort of stress in the internal family system, a lot of times we're just around people who've been in survival mode. And so like creative thinking and like pursuing joy, pursuing bliss, pursuing ecstasy, pursuing fun, or letting play be a priority. Like all of these things, it's just, if you live in the United States, at least we're inundated with this Protestant work ethic and this Calvinism that's sort of latent in our culture of like, that's super suspicious of
play and fun and joy.
These kinds of deep play and joy and fun. We're very cool with the sort of shallow stuff, but like we devalue ecstasy and joy and fun because it's frivolous or it's not going to get you to heaven or something.
Right. Right. And I was working with a client today who was trying to find his joy again. And and I was just relating different periods in my life where I felt like that too, or I felt like, oh, right, joy is shallow. It's not shallow. It's not at all.
I think fun is shallow, and that's perfectly fine. And I'm a big proponent of having fun as well. But joy is very deep. Mm-hmm. Joy and ecstasy are things that touch the core of our being and are where we. It's not just that we feel seen, we get to be expressed. And if you watch little kids, they get really into stuff and their faces light up. Yeah. And that is, Midori, when I teach with her, she says that that adult sexual play is first of all, play. Mm-hmm. It's childlike wonder with adult privileges like privacy and better toys. Or at least more expensive toys in some cases. It's our playtime. And I've noticed with a lot of my clients that even their recreation is very goal oriented. It's not play. Like there's a difference between I want to run a marathon and get a particular time. Like that's recreation, but it's not play.
Yeah.
it may be nourishing, but it's not play. Play is non-linear, non-directed, non-goal out oriented. And so sometimes the only place where we let ourselves have play is in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even let ourselves have that. Like, I must have an orgasm. I must give her an orgasm. It's that goal oriented, and that's not play. And so as a culture, we're suspicious of play and we're suspicious of sex. And I think those two things are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really ought to take a look at that and actually go, what would it be like if I just did the things that were fun?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think that could be an amazing note to end on. I'm curious if there's any last thing you want men to know, or any last, tip you have on asking for what you want.
I guess the one last thing I want to say is that to remember that it goes both ways. I think sometimes it's so easy for us to get caught up in our own stuff. Either I have to ask, I have to put it out there, I have to do the thing, that we don't give space to the other person, or I have to make sure that they can ask and they can do the thing, and that we don't give space for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the real thing is, it's a dance between two people, or more if you're into that. It's a dance between you and whoever you're in bed with,
right? Exactly.
Or you and whoever you're in relationship with, or you and whoever you're in friendship with. It's a dance between both, and it's a both and kind of thing, or it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, some relationships end up being more self-centered. Other relationships end up being more other-centered. They're both valid, but overall, the arc of it, if you can have both people at the table, it can be really, really valuable.
Yeah.
And amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
This was great.
And we already said, but I'll say it again, that you can find Marcia at www.askingforwhatyouwant.com.
Yes. And if you'd like to check out the other workshop I mentioned, the Make Hot Play Happen, it's at makehotplayhappen.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.